Good afternoon. Welcome to Capital Account. I'm Lauren Lister here in Washington, D.C. These are your headlines for October 10th, 2012. He is a UK politician with a US following and a Eurosceptic party that has seen its support grow, moving it from the fringe to a position of being a viable mainstream alternative. He's known for not mincing his words. UKIP leader and MEP Nigel Farage is here in our studio today for a sit-down. And the IMF says Europe's banks may need to sell as much as $4.5 trillion in assets through 2013, 18% more than it previously estimated. This is if policymakers fall short of their pledges to curb the crisis. Now, this forecast is for a painful deleveraging that would crimp growth. So, how much pain is still left in the Eurozone, and who is left to pick up that bill? And Jamie Dimon was in Washington today at the Council on Foreign Relations. We're weeks away from the one-year anniversary of MF Global's collapse, with JP Morgan being a major counterparty and custodial bank of MF Global. Capital Account asked, when did Jamie Dimon find out about the collapse?
Oh, you're taxing my memory at this point.
And did you have any conversation with Mr. Corzine?
No luck on that one, but we did take him to task on the Bear Stearns acquisition and the civil fraud suit. We'll show you what he said later in the show. Let's get to today's Capital Account. In the most gray and uninspiring of contexts, that of burgeoning EU bureaucracy, our next guest has managed to amass a highlight reel second to none, turning his European parliamentary position into a bully pulpit for a growing movement of Eurosceptics. Take a look.
You are all in denial. By any objective measure, the euro is a failure. Just who the hell do you think you people are? You are very, very dangerous people indeed. Your obsession with creating this euro state means that you're happy to destroy democracy. So what are you saying? That this isn't quite as bad as the USSR? I had totally underestimated the complete fanaticism, Mr. Barroso, of you, your College of Commissioners and the European Central Bank. Yes, it'll mean you'll lose your job, Mr. Barroso, but apart from that, why can't we do things as mature democracies? Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schulz, as well. I want you all fired. You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you?
Well, now everyone knows who he is because that video went viral, and everyone knows who Nigel Farage is, leader of the UK Independence Party, member of European Parliament. These speeches over the years have gone viral on the internet, and Mr. Farage has garnered a following not only at home, but here in the US. While at home, his party has gone from fringe to a force to be reckoned with. Nigel Farage joins me now live. We're so thrilled to have you in studio. Thanks for being here.
Pleased to be here, and thank you for showing my best clips.
We really did like your highlight reel. So much to choose from, hard to get it whittled down. So let's just start with you. Every time you give a speech on the floor of Parliament, when you come on this show and do an interview, it goes viral in the financial blogosphere here in the US. Why do you think your message resonates so much here in America?
Well, the global markets are all interconnected. You know, what happens particularly in New York and Chicago is totally linked in to what is happening in the Eurozone. And the Eurozone crisis is hanging heavily across the whole of the financial and investment community of the world. So people are really interested to hear what's going on. And what they get from Mr. Barroso and Van Rompuy and all the other ghastly people in Brussels that no one's ever voted for, what they get is this diet of, there's no problem, chaps, we're going to have a summit next Thursday, it'll all be sorted out. Well, there have been 21 summits over the last 2 years, and here we are today with Cyprus on the verge of needing a bailout, the Spanish position, frankly, looking perilous. And I think the reason my stuff goes viral is that I'm giving not just a counter-argument, but I think, and I believe and I hope, a pragmatic economic alternative.
Well, and kind of what you're getting at is there's a bull market for truth. There's a bull market for getting past the BS and the rhetoric. What I found interesting was even on the mainstream networks in the U.S., you've been on CNBC and Fox this week, I feel that you were more well received there than maybe you would be by Mr. Barroso and by some of the press in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's even into the mainstream in the U.S. You think this is, do you agree, first of all?
Well, I think, look, anybody that looks at economics from a fundamental perspective is going to say this Eurozone should never have been put together the way that it has been, and that frankly, it can't last. The only question is, how long will the agony go on for? And my worry, as you showed in that last clip of mine, my worry is that the political will to keep this thing propped up is so fanatical that it could be many, many years. It could be up to a decade that this crisis goes on.
One decade before what we see an exit?
Well, I said no. I think other exits will happen first. But the reality is that the whole European project was put together as part of a Franco-German pact. It was done with honourable intentions, namely to stop war, but it misunderstood that people don't want to be given a new identity and that you should never create a state without consent. But here we are, and no one's noticed. We've all watched Greece versus Germany, Spain versus Germany, and we've talked about the gap in competitiveness terms that has grown between them. What no one's noticed in the last 2 years is that gap between France and Germany is getting wider. We've now got a new French president whose views on economics, frankly, are mad, because the first three things that he does on becoming president, he reduces the retirement age from 62 to 60, he ups the minimum wage by more than the rate of inflation, and then he introduces a hate tax
75%
of 75%, and he says, if there were any entrepreneurs left in Paris, please catch the next Eurostar out. And because of that, I think this gap between France and Germany will get bigger, and the awful reality for the people that wanted to build a European state is I don't think in the end even France and Germany can survive together in same side economic and monetary union.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's bold, but let's back up a little bit, because have even you been surprised that we haven't seen a Greek exit yet, or that despite all of the pain, we've still seen Greeks go to the polls and, yes, give more support to anti-Euro parties, but ultimately re-elect mainstream parties, and that the Euro architects, despite the cost of these bailouts, still seem committed to keeping Greece in. Have you been surprised
yes,
on this line?
I have to say that I would have thought that by now the markets would have forced Greece out, and it hasn't happened. And I think Draghi's statement that we saw over the summer, the ECB president, when he said, we will do whatever it takes. And kind of they mean it. I mean, they are prepared to risk everything and more to defend this project. The clue was a meeting that I had last year with Angela Merkel, and I said to her, Chancellor, wouldn't it be kinder to your taxpayers, who've just spent 20 years paying for Eastern Germany to be reintegrated into Western Germany, wouldn't it be kinder to them to stop having to sign a blank cheque in perpetuity? And wouldn't it be a liberation for Greece to leave the euro, get the drachma back with a big devaluation and an opportunity to trade their way back to some sort of sanity?
Well, what did she say?
She said, no, Mr. Farage, if Greece leaves the euro, other countries will leave too, and that will be the end of our European dream.
So you think it's the fear of the dominoes?
But it's absolutely, that was what she was saying. But what she's also really saying is this: we don't care. We don't care that youth unemployment is nearly 60%. We don't care that 25% of private companies have gone bust in the last 5 years. We frankly don't care if the whole of Greece starves, as long as we maintain our Euro project. And that is why I think these people running Europe are bad people. I think they're dangerous people, and we saw a specimen, I think, in Athens yesterday of the future. If you take away from people their ability to vote to change their futures, they will turn nasty.
But they did vote for their futures, and they re-elected mainstream parties.
Well, actually, there wasn't a single opposition party.
Well,
Syriza were arguing about the terms of the bailouts, but they were not saying Greece should leave the euro. Nobody was saying Greece should leave the euro. It's as if the political class in Greece and in Spain and in Portugal are like rabbits in the headlights of an oncoming car. No one's got the self-confidence or the courage.
So you think everybody's terrified of the alternative?
Yes.
To sticking with these measures?
I think if somebody comes along, if a serious business figure in Greece was to come along and say, look, this will be painful, but hey, it's painful anyway.
Right.
We may suffer inflation. It may be difficult for the first year or two, but actually the only hope we've got is that we get our currency back. We're able to become much more competitive again. I think once that leadership is given, the people would follow. But at the moment, it's absent.
Okay, and what if this does continue? We just saw a report from the IMF coming out saying that if policymakers aren't able to fulfill all of their promises that they have given, that banks will have to deleverage, if you can even call it a deleveraging, because they've gotten bailed out thus far. $4.5 trillion in assets. At this point, what are the consequences of that kind of deleveraging, and who's left to bail the banks out with the court becoming more and more weak?
The IMF.
The IMF.
The IMF, which has done a good job since 1945, has now been hijacked. You know, it may be here in Washington, but effectively it's become the overseas bailout office for the euro. And if things go badly wrong, the IMF will be expected to put huge amounts of money in, and that, of course, includes America. Yeah. And I think there should be a bigger debate in America about, you know, should they still be putting 18% of this money into the euro bailouts via the IMF? So, I mean, I'm pretty unimpressed with all the IMF does.
Well, and it's interesting because that might be a discussion in Washington, but I don't think you'll ever see a mainstream news report, oh, everybody in the U.S. needs to worry about the money that the government's giving to the IMF. I'm wondering if you have been surprised, because you've been here all week. Is there a lack of knowledge of the nuances of Europe amongst people in the U.S., would you say?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've met, over the last couple of days, you know, some people that are very senior, very knowledgeable people, who kind of sort of think that the European Union is just some sort of free trade agreement. No, but really...
If it just was, there wouldn't be these problems.
You in Britain, you're not in the euro, so what's the problem? And there is a lack of understanding that the European Court of Justice is supreme over our own courts in our own countries, that even in the case of Britain, which is outside the euro, 75% of our laws are made somewhere else. There is incomprehension when you tell them that the Parliament has got 3 homes and it travels around like a circus, and that the budget hasn't been signed off by the auditors for the last 17 years in a row. I think there is, through much of the American media, not much knowledge about what's really going on over there.
Do you think that's dangerous, given the magnitude of Europe's problems right now,
I think it's changing, and I'll tell you why. Because when I meet the financial community over here, they do know what's going on.
Because they've got money at stake.
They know what's going on. And I think events like yesterday, when a German chancellor, I mean, Germany is a big, important country, when a German chancellor turns up in Athens to be met by people wearing swastikas and giving Nazi salutes, I think the media say, goodness me, what on earth is happening here? So I think things are changing. Yeah,
it is when you see the Molotov cocktails or the protests that the U.S. media pays attention, despite so much more of import going on. You know, I have to ask, you give these colorful speeches on the floor. You do not mince your words. Is the relationship with the other EU members of parliament and bureaucrats, is it as it would appear to be, given how you are on the floor in private? Or are you chumming with Van Rompuy and you go have a beer at the pub after being fined thousands of euros for...
it's not good.
Criticizing him.
No,
not good?
It's not good at all.
No beers with Van Rompuy?
Absolutely not. And I wouldn't want to have a drink with him, frankly. It's not that I disagree with these people. You know, I mean, I know people, you know, from the left of politics, and I might be more free market, and those guys you can talk to, disagree with, have a beer with, no problem. These people, it isn't that I disagree, they're bad people.
These people, you mean the bureaucrats?
I mean the people leading
Brussels.
The European project, and Barroso and Van Rompuy are at the top. They are out to destroy democracy, which is something that was so important that those that went before us actually went to war to defend the very principle of democracy, and these people want to crush it. These people have got this fanatical belief in their project, in their flag, and in building a new state. Well, it isn't going to work. And if they keep the whip hand for too long, I fear there'll be outbreaks of violence all over the Mediterranean.
And we may see more damp rag comments. You may be paying more fines, Mr. Farage.
Well, it's been calculated that if I am rude to Mr. Van Rompuy, and if I'm fined another 63 million times, I personally would have paid for the entire Euro bailout fund.
Oh, all right. We are going to keep you here. We're going to come back after break. More with Nigel Farage in just a minute. Still ahead, Capital Account producer Justine Underhill took on Jamie Dimon during a press conference here in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Stay tuned to find out what he said. But first, your closing market numbers.
You know how sometimes you see a story and it seems so whole and complete, you think you understand it, and then you glimpse something else. You hear or see some other part of it and realize everything you thought you knew, you don't know? I'm Tom Hartman. Welcome to The Big Picture.
Welcome back. We're talking to Nigel Farage today. And at home in the UK, his party, UKIP, has been gaining steam in 2009 elections. They were polling with double the support of the stage in the prior electoral process that they had. And just last month, this is a headline from The Guardian. No exaggeration. UKIP is now a force to reckon with. If the cards fall its way, Nigel Farage's party will shape the 2015 election and politics of Britain and Europe for a generation. So let's bring our guest back in and talk to him about this growth and support. So, Mr. Farage, what do you attribute that growth in support to? Is it mostly the Eurosceptic message, or is it mostly the UKIP domestic policy platform that people are in support of?
I think on the Eurosceptic message, to a large extent, people say, well, UKIP have been proven right. Now, even people that don't like me, you know, UKIP have been right about what they've said. Okay. And that this topic about democracy, about self-government, which really the mainstream media and parties tried to bury under the carpet. You know, let's not discuss it in front of the children. That unavoidably has now rocketed up the agenda of politics in the United Kingdom. But it's not just that. I think in the early days, UKIP was necessarily a protest party against what was happening in the European Union. And we used to talk about who governs Britain. We're now talking about how that Britain should be governed. So we're now saying, once we're free of it, once we've cut the Gordian knot of being in the EU, we will be able to liberalise our labour markets. We will, you know, all these things we're able to do with the money and with the ability to have our own trade deals across the rest of the world, which we're currently forbidden from doing. So I think that the reason people are coming to us isn't just any one simple thing. It's a big, broad agenda that is attractive to people.
Yeah.
That's one reason.
Okay.
The second reason is that for most of UKIP's existence, we used to draw our support from across the spectrum. Patriotic old Labour, classical Liberals, Conservatives, all sorts of people would vote for us. But for 13 years, the Tory party were in opposition, which is almost the entire lifetime of UKIP. Okay. And people used to say, well, look, Nigel, we agree with you, old boy, absolutely marvellous, but we've got to vote Tory, we want to get Labour out, and David Cameron's playing a very clever game. Just you wait till David gets in, they used to say. You'll see, well, David is in, and they've seen, and he's broken promises on giving a referendum. He's done nothing to halt mass immigration into Britain. He hasn't dared address the issue of human rights. So there is a big disenchantment, I think, and people see Cameron, frankly, as indistinguishable from Clegg and Miliband in terms of policy.
Okay. It's interesting. There's a similar conversation in the U.S. where you have presidents from both parties that end up carrying out very much the same platform, similar policies. Do you think a politician like Ron Paul would be the most comparable in the U.S. to you, or kind of his more libertarian stance?
I think that Ron Paul's campaign over years to campaign for, in a democracy, we want personal liberty and the responsibility that goes with that. And we want a smaller state, and we don't want Washington in control of absolutely everything. I think there are some strong similarities,
And that said, I heard you recently say that the U.S., you would think there would be more of a conversation about the debt in this country. And I would agree with you. I completely agree with you. We talk about it all the time. It seems that other issues have become more pressing in more of the national psyche and in the mainstream media. I'm wondering if you think that the day of reckoning is being delayed by problems on the other side of the Atlantic or the Federal Reserve's policies, and how long it can continue.
Well, I mean, just as what's been happening with the Eurozone crisis with the last 21 summits is they continue to kick the can down the road. The same is happening to a large extent in America with your massive, massive annual deficit. Nobody's really addressing this. I know that Romney, in that debate, did begin to talk about this, but frankly, your public finances are no better than the rest of the Eurozone's, and the extent to which national debt is growing year on year on year is something very serious. I mean, frankly, what Western governments are doing at the moment is they're stealing money from their grandchildren.
Oh, absolutely, for the taxation down the line to pay for spending today. So when do you think the day of reckoning does come in the U.S.? Because the Fed has shown that it has a willingness to buy bonds. What it can't control is faith in the dollar in foreign exchange markets.
No, that's true. That's true. I don't think the day of reckoning has come. I'm pleased that Romney did well in that debate the other week, but I would like to see him be much more assertive. I'd like to see Romney say, look, you know, Barack's a nice chap, but he's proved he's not really up to the job. I have been successful in business. I've gone out there, I've done it, I've made tough decisions, I've run a company, I'm the man you need to run this economy. And let me tell you, America, it's going to be rough, it's going to be tough. There are going to have to be some very big cutbacks in the size of a state. But if you follow me, and we go on this course, we'll get this ship steady again.
We'll see if he would even be able to follow through on that. What he's proposing now isn't even a plan that would do that. And defense spending he wants to increase. I'm curious, we've heard warmongering from Romney towards Iran. In general, I think some would say that the U.S. has been saber-rattling about war in Iran. What do you think the reaction would be among financial and political elites in Europe if there was a war with Iran led by the U.S.
I think people would be very, very worried. I mean, look, Iran is a big country. We are now over a decade into a war in Afghanistan. And let's be honest, we're achieving nothing.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
We're achieving nothing. Iraq, hugely expensive. OK, Saddam's gone, but does anybody really think that Iraq's a happier, better place?
No.
Or will be in 5 or 10 years' time? And if what we're saying with Iran is we want to stop them getting nuclear weapons, frankly, there's not much we can do to stop them acquiring nuclear weapons. I think what we need to do with Iran, frankly, is we need to sit down and attempt to have a very frank conversation with them. But to think by going to war that we will achieve much in Iran or stop them getting nuclear weapons, I think is ridiculous. And personally, I'm extremely tired of the United Kingdom joining in some of these overseas ventures when we never really think what the end game is going to be.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I do want to talk about regulation for a moment, because regulation is one of the things that we've spoken about before. One time when I interviewed you, you were coming from a non-wine party for a wine that couldn't call itself wine because of EU regulations. In the U.S., we have, for example, Obamacare that was supposed to help everybody get insurance. Now we're seeing reports from major restaurant chains, for example, that they're trying out shifting people to part-time workers to see if that would defray the costs of complying with Obamacare. How do you set up regulations that set rules in a free market, but that don't go so far as to create unintended consequences for businesses, workers, taxpayers, even with
I think in the end, this comes down to what your basic assumption is. You know, the basic assumption of the people that I do battle with in Brussels is that the state is the best means through which we can actually get the marketplace to be successful and get the relationship between employer and employee to be right. The state must regulate, the state must legislate, and the state gets it right. That's their philosophy. My philosophy is completely different. My philosophy is we should get the state out of business and out of people's lives as much as possible with, albeit, some sensible, basic human protections for people so that they're not exploited and not abused. And it really is, which side of that fence do you come from? Do you believe the state can do this stuff, or do you believe that free enterprise and wealth are created by individuals who've got the state freed from them? And right at the minute, the statists are in control everywhere. They're in control in Westminster, they're in control in Brussels, and they're in control here in Washington, where Washington is building up a bigger and bigger state at the expense of the constituent parts of the USA. So there are some similarities.
There are many similarities, and a message like yours continues to grow and grow in popularity. So I really appreciate you being here on this show and sharing it with us. Nigel Farage, he's the UKIP leader and a member of European Parliament. Jamie Dimon was in Washington at the Council of Foreign Relations. Capitol Account had some questions for him. And you may have already seen some of the headlines on his admissions about Bear Stearns. Well, eliciting those comments was one of our very own Capitol Account producers, Justine Underhill. Here's how it went down in the Q&A.
You mentioned that companies make mistakes, and now that there's a civil lawsuit for Bear Stearns related to fraud. Do you regret participating with the Federal Reserve to buy Bear Stearns in 2008?
We didn't participate with the Federal Reserve, okay?
And did you miss something when you told investors that Bear Stearns, the acquisition, would not be material?
Well, I'm not sure I ever said that. So Bear Stearns, we were asked to buy Bear Stearns. Someone said the Fed did us a favor to finance something and stuff like that. No, we did them a favor. I mean, let's get this one exactly right. We were asked to do it. We did it at great risk to ourselves, and we had the capability and capital and people to do extensive due diligence. The one thing I was terrified about was, had they gone bankrupt, all these lawsuits, there'd be no money. There'd be no lawsuits. There'd be no stock drop lawsuits. There'd be no class action lawsuits. There'd be no mortgage lawsuits because there'd be no money. But we bought it, and the second we bought it, we knew we had some, we were buying some, as some reporters point out. I've written extensively about would I have done Bear Stearns again, knowing what I know today. It's real close. It's really close. I will not, but what I know today, if they called me again to do something again like that, I couldn't do it. My board wouldn't allow me, because you take on these obligations. I did get a letter from one of the senior regulators late on Sunday night before we signed it that said, please take in consideration when you want to come after us down the road for some of the Bear Stearns did, that JP was asked to do this by the federal government. And we've been very honest with the shows about the economic and financial effects of Bear Stearns. We have some great things with Bear Stearns, some businesses and their building and some great people, and some terrible things. And I forgot the exact number, but I'm going to say we've lost $5 to $10 billion on various things related to Bear Stearns now. And yes, I put it in the unfair category. Hey, I'm a big boy. I'll survive. We were very honest with our shareholders. But I think the government should think twice before they punish businesses every single time something goes wrong.
Nice work with Justine and Dimitri in helping out with that. And in reference to the materiality of acquiring Bear Stearns, this was cited by Chris Whalen, a bank analyst. He also used to work at Bear. He's been a guest on this show, very trustworthy source. He had written in a post a couple years ago, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon told investors that the acquisition of Bear Stearns would not be material to investors. You can see that post of his on Zero Hedge and numerous other sites. That's where we're going to have to leave it today. Thank you so much for our show. That's it for our show. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to come back tomorrow. And in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Lauren Lister. You can go like us on our Facebook page. There's the address. You can catch any shows you missed or give us feedback. I'll respond on Friday at youtube.com/capitalaccount. You can watch us in HD on Hulu at hulu.com/capital-account. From everyone here, have a great night.